Every year for the past decade, our countryside has been drenched with around 30,000 tonnes of pesticides. It seems that not all of that has hit the right mark.
I'm imprisoned in my own home because the farmers never seem to stop spraying or spreading pesticides, so it's impossible. Some of the pesticides, I feel as if I've had a pre-med just before an actual operation, and I just want to fall asleep and my muscles are so weak and I lose the grip in my hands. Then others, I just can't sit still.
Frances Bolton has lived with epilepsy ever since childhood, but pesticides have had such a severe effect on her condition that the countryside she grew up in has now become a threat.
I feel very annoyed because I no longer have choice in my life, and I love gardening, and I just can't do the garden here at all. And I really don't want to leave, but I'm forced into it because of the pesticides. I have to go and live in a town now.
Each year without fail, a significant number of people are overexposed to pesticides, often with serious effects. Aerial spraying is responsible for some of the worst cases, and because of this, has dramatically declined in recent years. But that puts a greater burden onto tractor spraying, which is not always more accurate.
It was a spring day in 1990. I came down here with the JCB to clean out the river and heard a tractor in the background. The spray of some description came across. Of course, the wind was from the northeast and there was virtually no leaves on the trees to act as a barrier. And we felt uncomfortable within our lungs. I had a loss of breath and a chestiness and a lot of coughing, and I did not feel well at all.
Within 10 days, Mike had been admitted to hospital, seriously ill. Doctors told him that his autoimmune system had been irreversibly damaged.
Well, they classified it as rheumatoid arthritis, pharyngitis, thyroid gland problems and diabetes. It all came at the one time.
But despite the near miraculous coincidence that he became disabled so soon after the spraying, doctors from his local health and safety executive were unable to establish a connection, and Mike was advised that he had no legal case against the farmer.
Well, now I tend to look around to make sure that nobody's, wandering around with a tractor or aerial spray, and I'm thinking back to when it happened to me, and it's quite frightening because it's changed my whole way of life.
But not all of the experts are as doubtful about some pesticides' harmful effects.
Pesticides certainly can cause long-term damage. If someone is severely exposed, say for example to an organophosphate pesticide, then that might cause muscle paralysis, which in turn could affect the breathing. So you would have a lack of oxygen getting around to the brain and to other major organs. And so you could have a failure of those, which would have a consequence for the long term.
The responsibility for investigating poisoning incidents lies with the Health and Safety Executive. Their figures show that there were just 43 suspected poisonings last year. But there are a number of reasons to be sceptical of this total. Despite intense criticism of staffing levels, there are still only 171 inspectors to cover the whole of mainland Britain. And for GPs to report an incident depends on recognising pesticides as a possible cause. Unlikely, with a system which gives doctors just 2 days training on pesticides out of 4 years.
Sadly, the reported cases only represent the tip of what is likely to be a very toxic iceberg. Friends of the Earth, for this reason, have published a series of reports over the last decade outlining cases where individuals seem to have been affected by pesticide poisonings. Unfortunately, understanding of pesticide poisoning is still in its infancy. Friends of the Earth would like to see a far more precautionary attitude towards pesticide poisoning, where the balance of doubt favours the public rather than the toxic chemical, the pesticide.
This sustained assault has forced the agrochemical industry out of the bunker, to claim the merits of its highly prized and highly lucrative products.
There are always going to be people who have gone to the doctor and the doctor has not been able to tell them what's wrong with them. And unfortunately, some of these people have read in the press some alarmist stories about the unreal effect of pesticides, and they have linked two and two together and not necessarily have made four, as it were.
The industry's scientists are certain that the extensive testing carried out on products before they reach the market is an almost watertight assurance of their safety.
I don't believe that most people realise how much testing is done before a pesticide is actually allowed onto the market. I think if you look at all the information that is available and you view that information objectively, then I honestly believe that there is no cause for concern.
But the industry's record shows that it doesn't always spot harmful products. After a number of highly embarrassing cases in the early 1980s, the government was forced to set up a review of all the older pesticides. But the review's not scheduled for completion until the end of the century, so we won't know for many years whether all the products that our countryside is currently being coated with are safe. Despite this review, the government's not convinced that there's a wider problem.
Any evidence that a pesticide is being used on farms in a way which can endanger members of the public is of great concern to government departments. The small number of complaints received from people claiming to be affected is confirmation that pesticide misuse is not widespread.
But even if we were to accept the government's own statistics, shouldn't cases like Enfys Chapman's give cause for concern?
Well, I was exposed to spray because a helicopter sprayed my cows and me and my sons while on the way to spray the neighbouring farmer's field. I was having convulsive spasms. I was incontinent. I was strapped down to a stretcher. Really manacled down to it because my movements were so violent. I became unable to walk or use my arms.
In such an obvious case, it would seem that full compensation should be a mere formality.
When it became known that I was going to sue the sprayer, then my problem started, because no one wants to get involved in litigation. Doctors won't commit themselves, and of course the establishment is very wary. So I was shunned.
But her doctors were able to present Enfys with a stark choice: move to a town to escape the spraying, or face the prospect of an early death. As a result of her experiences, Enfys created the Pesticide Exposure Group of Sufferers.
Well, we have 650 documented cases, and I think the agrochemical world realises that the problem is real, and that research will show that what we're saying is correct. And I think probably the government will take it over. I jolly well hope they do.
But the government and the agrochemical industry are still claiming that pesticide poisoning isn't widespread, even though many scientists are saying that we don't know enough to be certain. Can we really continue to assume that these chemicals are safe, when the experiences of so many people demand action to make our environment a safer place to live in?